The house was quiet in the way it usually was on weekday evenings, not peaceful, just empty. The kind of silence that settles in after a lifetime of noise fades away. I was folding laundry on the couch, my son's old college hoodie still mixed in with my towels, because I never had the heart to throw it out. It still smelled faintly like his detergent, the one he used before he got married, before everything changed. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I smiled before I even looked at it. Mothers do that. We assume it's love calling. It was a text from my son. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened it, already thinking about what I'd say back. Maybe he was confirming dinner plans. Maybe he wanted advice. Maybe he just missed me. Instead, I read, "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." I stared at the screen, waiting for the rest of the message to load. A typo, a joke, a follow-up explaining this was all some misunderstanding. Nothing came. I read it again, slower this time. Each word landed heavier than the last, like stones being placed carefully on my chest. "You weren't invited. Not we decided, not maybe another time, just erased, dismissed, as if I were a stranger who had overstepped." My hands began to shake. I sat down hard on the couch, the laundry sliding to the floor. The room felt smaller, like the walls were inching closer. I thought of the dinners I had cooked for him, hundreds of them. Burnt casseroles, birthday cakes that leaned to one side, late, night soups when he was sick. I thought of the nights I stayed awake waiting for him to come home. The mornings I woke early to make sure he never left hungry. And now I wasn't wanted at a dinner table, not even enough to be told gently. I typed and deleted 3 responses. What did I do wrong? Delete. I'm still your mother. Delete. Okay, delete. In the end, I sent nothing. I placed the phone face down and pressed my palms into my eyes, but the tears came anyway, quiet ones. The kind you cry when you don't want anyone, even yourself, to hear. I wondered when exactly I had become a problem. When loving him turned into something inconvenient. Memories flooded in without permission. His first day of school, clinging to my leg. His graduation, scanning the crowd until his eyes found mine. The way he used to call just to ask how long to boil pasta. I raised that boy, with scraped knuckles and tired bones and a heart that never learned how to stop worrying. And now, through a single text, I had been put in my place. That night, I ate dinner alone. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call a friend. I just sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me, realizing this wasn't really about one dinner. It was about being slowly pushed out of a life I built with my own hands, and for the first time, I understood something painful and true. Losing a child doesn't always happen in a moment. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a text message you never expected to receive. The morning after the message, I woke up with the strange hope that it had all been a dream. That I'd imagined the words, twisted something harmless into something cruel. I reached for my phone before my feet touched the floor, my heart thudding like it already knew the truth. The message was still there, unchanged, unapologetic. I didn't reply. That was the first thing I took from them, my reaction. Days passed, then weeks. I stopped being the one who called first. I stopped sending little check-in texts, the ones that always began with just wondering if you're okay. I told myself I was giving them space, but deep down, I was testing something I already feared. If I disappeared, would anyone notice? The answer came quietly. No one did. There were dinners I knew about only through social media. Photos of a table crowded with laughter, wine glasses raised, familiar faces leaning close. I studied each picture longer than I should have, searching for the empty space where I used to sit. It was like watching a life I once belonged to continue without me, smoother and more polished now that I was gone. I remembered the early days after my son's marriage, how his wife's smile never quite reached her eyes when I entered the room, How my suggestions were brushed aside, my stories interrupted. How she once laughed and said, "You don't have to worry anymore, he has me now." I had laughed too, pretending it didn't feel like a door gently closing in my face. I started to realize that the text message hadn't been sudden. It had been prepared, carefully built over time from small moments I'd ignored because I loved my son too much to see clearly. Holidays came and went. I waited for an invitation that never arrived. I told neighbors I preferred quiet celebrations. I told coworkers my son was busy. I became very good at protecting other people from the truth, even as it hollowed me out. At night, I wrote in a notebook I'd found at the back of a drawer. I wrote everything I'd never said. How I paid part of their rent when money was tight. How I watched their child without complaint, canceling my own plans so they could have a break. How love, when taken for granted, begins to feel like obligation, and how obligation eventually turns into resentment. The more I wrote, the clearer things became. I hadn't failed as a mother. I had simply stayed too long in a place where I was no longer welcome. One afternoon, I passed by a restaurant we used to go to as a family. My son always ordered the same thing. I almost went in, then stopped myself. I realized how often my life still revolved around him, where he liked to eat, what he liked to talk about, how he preferred his coffee. That was when the silence shifted. It stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like protection. I didn't block them. I didn't announce my distance. I just stepped back. No explanations, no dramatic goodbyes. I let the quiet do what words never could. And in that quiet, something unexpected happened. I began to hear myself again. My thoughts, my needs, my worth. They didn't know it yet, but the absence they'd created was about to teach all of us something important. Because silence, when chosen, is not weakness. It's the beginning of strength. Change didn't arrive loudly. It didn't announce itself with bold decisions or dramatic speeches. It came in small, almost invisible ways, the kind that only mattered because they added up. I started waking up earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Mornings became mine again. I drank my coffee slowly instead of gulping it down between obligations. I took walks without checking my phone every few minutes, no longer waiting for a message that might never come. I cleaned out closets that had become storage spaces for the past. Boxes labeled "just in case" were finally opened. Some things I kept, others I let go of without ceremony. I realized how much of my home and my life had been arranged around someone who no longer needed me. I reconnected with people I'd quietly drifted away from, old friends who remembered me as more than just someone's mother. We laughed about memories that didn't include my son at all, and for the first time, that didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like rediscovery. I even began doing something radical. I stopped saying yes. When my son's wife texted once, casually asking if I could watch their child for a few hours, I stared at the screen longer than I should have. My hands didn't shake this time. I replied kindly, briefly, telling her I already had plans. It wasn't a lie. My plan was myself. There was no argument, no apology, just a short okay, and that was when I understood how conditional my presence had become. Without my constant availability, small inconveniences started piling up for them. Babysitters cost money. Schedules became complicated. Favors had to be returned instead of assumed. I didn't hear about these struggles directly, but I sensed them in the pauses, the hesitations, the sudden politeness in their messages. Meanwhile, my life grew fuller. I took a class I'd always postponed. I spent money on myself without guilt. I learned that joy didn't need permission. I learned that rest wasn't laziness. I learned that love, when it's healthy, doesn't make you feel small. Months passed before my son finally called. Not texted, called. I watched the phone ring, my heart thudding in a familiar way. For a moment, the old reflex returned, answer immediately, reassure, soften everything. But I let it ring once more before picking up. His voice sounded different, careful, almost unsure. "Hey, Mom, I haven't heard from you in a while." I smiled, not out of bitterness, but clarity. "I know," I said gently, "I've been busy." There was a pause on the line. I imagined him realizing something had shifted, something he couldn't quite name. He asked how I was, really asked, as if the answer might surprise him, and it did. I told him I was good. I told him I was happy. He didn't know what to say to that. When we hung up, I didn't feel drained. I didn't replay the conversation, wondering what I'd done wrong. I simply placed the phone down and continued with my day. That was the quiet rise, no revenge, no confrontation, no demands, just a woman who remembered who she was before she was reduced to an inconvenience. And somewhere between my absence and my peace, they began to feel the weight of what they'd pushed away. Because when you stop chasing people who don't choose you, they finally notice your value when it's no longer freely given. The invitation came on a Tuesday afternoon, wrapped in politeness and hesitation. My son called first, not to ask, but to prepare the ground, as if he were afraid the words might shatter if spoken too plainly. "We were thinking," he said carefully, "maybe we could all have dinner together. It's been a while." I understood what he wasn't saying. Things weren't as smooth as they once were. My absence had created a space they didn't know how to fill. And now suddenly I was wanted again. "I'd like that," I replied after a pause, "but I'll choose the place." Another silence. Then, okay. The restaurant was small and quiet, the kind that didn't rush you through your meal. When I arrived, they were already seated. My son stood when he saw me. His wife smiled, polite, practiced, cautious. I returned it calmly, no anger. No need. Dinner unfolded slowly. Safe topics. Work, weather, their child. I listened more than I spoke. I noticed how often my son glanced at me, as if trying to find the version of me he remembered, the one who bent, the one who filled gaps without being asked. She finally broke. "I hope you didn't feel excluded before," she said lightly, lifting her glass. "We just needed boundaries." I met her eyes. "Not cold, not hostile, honest. I did feel excluded," I said, "and I respected your boundaries by creating my own." The table went still. I didn't accuse, I didn't raise my voice. I spoke like someone who had already done her healing. I raised my son to build his own life, I continued. But I didn't expect to be erased from it. When I was told I wasn't wanted at dinner, I realized something important. I had been shrinking to stay included, so I stopped. My son's face tightened. Regret settled into his expression, heavy and overdue. "I should have handled that differently," he said quietly. "I hurt you, yes," I replied, "you did. There was no drama in the truth, just wait, dessert came." I declined, not because I wasn't hungry, but because I was already full. Full of peace, full of closure. When the check arrived, I reached for it. "Oh no, Mom," my son started. "I've got this," I said gently. "Consider it my treat." That was the sweetest revenge of all, not the bill, but the message behind it. I no longer needed anything from them, not approval, not access, not permission to exist in their lives. Outside, the night air was cool. My son hugged me longer than expected. His wife thanked me. I accepted both with grace. As I walked to my car, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Because revenge doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like dignity, like boundaries, like a woman who was once dismissed, now walking away whole. And if they ever wondered how a single text message could change everything, the answer was simple. It didn't break me. It finally set me free.